Hello again from Florida. When you watch this, I shouldn't be in Florida, but I'm in Florida again now, and I'm enjoying it very much. My mom's doing great. Thanks for asking. Cleta Mitchell. I was very privileged to have Cleta Mitchell on the show once before. She is Ms. Madam, Lady, election law, election litigation. She's the good, unsanctioned, and ethical version of Mark Elias to the extent that Harmeet Dillon isn't. Together they make one incredible, super. Well, I'm going to let her tell you the story, because the fact is, coming out of the midterms, people don't necessarily feel that things went the way they wanted them to go. There's no question that there's still a lot of funny business going on in the courts. I'm sorry, not so much in the courts, but in the polls. And Cleta very graciously agreed to come on and bring us up to speed post midterms 2022. What have we learned? What did we accomplish? What did we aspire to that was not accomplished? All the things. Cleta, thanks for coming again.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm fine. Thank you.
Good. Tell me the story. What's the elevator pitch on your experiences as an election lawyer following the midterms or during the midterms?
So for those who don't know, I'm the senior legal fellow at the Conservative Partnership Institute, and we have created.
I should have introduced you.
That's all right. That's all right.
I assume everyone remembers from the last one. But why would I assume it? I don't even listen to podcasts. Okay.
So we created over the last 18 months, almost 2 years, the Election Integrity Network, and I'm the chairman of that. And what that is, it's a platform. It's not really an organization. It's a platform for engaging citizens in the election integrity process, really. And we worked really hard to recruit, train, and deploy citizens all across the country to become involved in knowing and understanding and really engaging in the election system, the election process. And
how are you doing that? If you don't mind my interrupting, what method are you using to recruit people into that network?
Well, we started between February and July of last year. We recruited and we conducted election integrity statewide summits in 8 states, and we brought people together. And those were the states where we'd had problems in 2020, and as well as Virginia, where they have elections every year. So we started in 2021 in Virginia as a sort of beta site, and found that really does work to bring people together to do training, not to hear speeches, not to gripe about how bad this was or that was, but to get engaged in the process, the election process, and train people how to do that. So we published a year ago the Citizens Guide to Building an Election Integrity Infrastructure at the local and state levels. We have created the master class, almost 20 training videos that tell people how to have a local election integrity task force, how to work on cleaning voter rolls, what is the citizen engagement on overseeing the election technology, not just the voting machines, but there's so much technology that's used in elections, and how can citizens be involved in having oversight of that so the vendors don't control everything. So we've been about the business of developing resources, recruiting people, and putting resources in their hands so that they can know what to do. That's how we've done that. And we now have state election coalitions in 10 states that are probably really, I would say, they've taken root. We probably have another 10 or 11 states where they're just getting started. We recruited and deployed and trained thousands of people to go become election workers, officials, judges, and to become observers. So that's what we have done for the last 18 months. Now, what have we learned in that time? Let me tell you some good things. Citizens are interested. They know that just like parents and school boards, they better be there. You can't just turn it over to a group of people and expect that they're going to do it right. and they're not going to indoctrinate your kids, and they're not going to be in partnership with the left in your local schools. That's what we've done with the elections. We have to be there. Because let me tell you what, we have learned how embedded left-wing organizations are in our election system, nationwide, local, state. I mean, it's shocking how embedded they are. But we created this national working group, Citizens Research Project, teaching people how to go find out what groups are in their election offices. And so the good news is we've had hundreds and really thousands of citizens who've gotten up off their couches and they've gotten engaged. That's a really good thing.
Well, you know what's a really good thing is also what you're describing. It's not also, it's another aspect of the same thing, I guess. You're describing something which is taking back the narrative from those who say it doesn't matter. It's hopeless. It doesn't matter. Why bother voting? If you say that, you are conceding everything.
To the left. You're conceding your country is what you're doing. And look, I'm not prepared to do that. I'm going to do this until I don't have any capability or breath or life in me to do, because we can't just concede our election system to the left. So we've really, it's been an amazing experience. Honestly, I sit on these calls with people in the States, and it makes me want to cry, because there are all these people who are so knowledgeable and are learning more all the time. So that's what we've been doing. And let me tell you how that has manifested itself. Just two examples I think are really critical. In Maricopa County, now, the people who run the elections in Maricopa County, Arizona, the same people who fought that audit tooth and nail, the state Senate audit of Maricopa County from 2020, Bill Gates, a different Bill Gates, Republican county supervisor, he did everything he could do to keep that audit from going forward, from being successful. They deleted files. They didn't cooperate. Hideous. Nothing to see here. Fast forward, and a guy who was elected to be the supervisor of elections, and his name is Stephen Richer, and he also fought it tooth and nail. Started a super PAC. Now, this is a guy who's supposed to be overseeing the election. Started a super PAC to defeat Kerry Lake, Mark Fincham, and the MAGA candidates. He's running the elections, right?
Mind-boggling.
And then they have another person whose name escapes me. But these three people who said everything was fine. Well, guess what? We had worked very hard to recruit, train, and deploy and get authorized election workers, even at the point of working with the Republican National Committee to persuade them that they needed to sue Maricopa County, because the law requires parity between Democrats and Republicans as election officials appointed by the county. And they'd been filling those Republican slots with Democrats forever. And the RNC did agree and sued them. And then guess what? Now they agreed to fill the Republican slots with Republicans. Funniest thing. So now we've got these people in position to watch.
But when did that requirement?
It's always been the law.
No, but when did you get the court order that said, "Hey, make it," but you're not complying?
October.
So just before the election,
right?
And meanwhile, though, you have these Republicans
running
in Maricopa whose party affiliation complies, and I don't know who gets to decide who represents the party. In other words, but I guess if these people are running the Arizona,
they were elected, but they ran as Republicans. But what I'm saying is that the slots at the voting centers, they don't have precincts. That's another problem in Maricopa County. But the election officials they're these different positions, like an election judge or and it's supposed to be 50-50 Democrat Republican. But let me tell you what, all over the country, I've known this as an election lawyer for decades, that Republicans never fill those slots. They always
Right.
get filled by Democrats. It's one of my pet peeves with the Republican Party. But
Yeah, I remember when I was deployed to Pennsylvania, they would always say that, there are certain precincts we can't even get. There, there aren't Republicans,
that's right.
and I
And
remember that.
Philadelphia is
Right,
a big problem because in
and
Pennsylvania, the law requires you have to live in the county, and there aren't that many Republicans in the county. But let me go back to Arizona. So here's what happened. We sent out a survey to all of our volunteers. We had over 200 people as part of our statewide coalition in Arizona. And within hours of sending out that survey, which we sent out about a few days after the November 8th election, we started getting back reports, eyewitness accounts of everything they had seen and documented about the chaos on November the 8th, particularly in, guess what, the Republican areas and the voting centers. See, they don't have precinct polling places any longer in Maricopa County. They have what they call voting centers. So your ballot has to be customized to you, and it will be different from the person in front of you or behind you in the line. You give me your address, and then that spits out a ballot that's customized to where you live in terms of who you get to vote for, the offices and the candidates you're voting for local races. I mean, it's all the same for the state Senate the U.S. Senate or the governor, but it's not for state representative, city council, et cetera. So the first thing that happened in these voting centers is that the printers wouldn't print out the ballots. So you start having these long lines. The printers are not properly calibrated. There's something going on election day that did not happen in early voting, but it sure happened on election day. So you start having these long lines in more than half of the voting centers. And then if you finally did get a ballot and mark your ballot, then you take it over to put it in the tabulator, and the tabulators weren't working. And people would put them in one time, two times, rejected 8, 9 times. The lines were hours long. And then they would say, well, just put your ballot in drawer number 3 and go, and we'll get it sorted out. And then they started commingling the untabulated ballots with the tabulated ballots. And then they went on TV and told everybody, here are some places where where everything's working. So go there. The problem is they didn't tell people who had checked into one voting center and were having a problem that they shouldn't leave without checking out, because guess what? They showed up at the other voting center and said, I came here because I couldn't vote over there. They said, oh, this says you've already voted. You didn't check out in the first place. That in a nutshell is what happened, but it impacted thousands of voters in Maricopa County,
now
more than
this
the election.
really important question. I think this is the question that I have not, because I'm not nearly as well informed as you. I've had trouble getting across to people. Why is it that these things happen, even though we know these are problem counties, we know there's a problem state, we know that there's a problem party apparatus in Arizona? Why do we, with all of the deployments and all the focus and all the knowledge that we did have effective name your date in 2022 before election day, why couldn't we prevent these things from happening? I've got a guess, but I want to hear the real answer.
Well, when the people who are, one of the things I will tell you is our local leaders went into the election offices and said, you've got to make sure you have the right paper and printer, toner, ink, because that had been a problem in 2020. You've got to make sure you have the right ballot marking information devices. That was a problem in 2020. And they went in and made an effort and talked to these people who are running the election. And the resistance, they finally said, okay, we've got it covered. We've got everything covered. Well, except they didn't have it all covered. And so what do you do when you have complete, and I don't know that I would say it's incompetence. I want to know whether this was intentional. And because these things happened in 2020 under the same regime. So you tell me, is it intentional? or not.
And you see, what I'm always trying to get across to people is that all the lawyers in the world can't physically make people do their jobs.
That's right.
I can get you orders. I'll never forget going back to Pennsylvania. I was in the Philadelphia, a convention center. We got the order from the appellate division saying you've got to let these people in to observe. And the lawyer for the Philadelphia Board of Elections said, no,
I know.
we're not. And we call you know all this. We called the sheriff and said, I've got a state court order, because they knew that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is a political body and not a judicial body in any meaningful sense, was gonna save their bacon. And we said to the sheriff, we want to enforce this order. He said, I'm sorry, do you want that with pepperoni or plain?
Right.
Zero. So you can send 30 lawyers down and you can spend $1 gazillion on stuff, but if you have an inherently corrupt structure, lawyers can't fix that.
Well, I got to tell you, we're waiting right now because Kari Lake has filed. Actually, each of the statewide candidates have filed legal actions, and honestly, just pray that the judge will actually do something about this, because if the judiciary continues to refuse to do its job and to insist that the law be followed, I don't know. I mean, we have to have judges who will step up and do their jobs. And if that would happen, honestly, if the judge would accept Kari Lake's would deny the motion to dismiss and allow the evidence of all of these problems to be introduced and have an evidentiary hearing. If we could just pray that the judge will order that the trial be allowed to take place so that all of this can be put in the record.
Listen, a person is allowed to pray for a miracle, but that's what we're talking about here, because the judiciary has been utterly socialized.
Yes.
They follow each other like ducks crossing the street.
Yep.
And the Supreme Court sets the tone.
Yep.
And they drop the ball, and they drop the
ball big time in 2020.
And so the message of the judiciary is, we don't do this. We don't do this. If all, and I remember saying, if you had a bunch of members of the Ku Klux Klan come into a state or a town, take over its election apparatus, and do exactly the same thing that these people are doing, but they were doing it because they're white supremacists.
Yes.
There would be a gigantic social movement,
honestly, and the Department of Justice would be there, and
give me
Al
liberty
Sharpton,
and give me.
Oh yeah. It is such a double standard. It is such a double standard. So I am so hopeful that this judge who set an order, a scheduling order, it's very expedited, which it's supposed to be. And I'm sure that I think tomorrow is the date when Katie Hobbs will file her motion to dismiss the lawsuit. Kari Lake will file a response on Sunday, and then the judge has to decide. And there's been a hearing date set, if it does go forward, for next week. And that's what we need. We need to be able to put on the evidence of the failures and the flaws in the process. And there needs to be a remedy ordered. And I promise you, if that would ever start to happen, it would break the logjam, and it would encourage other judges. I know of cases that are pending around the country on things like cleaning voter rolls and all these judges. And I have to explain to the lawyers in these states who are bringing these actions, I said, listen, you got to remember that the media is going to attack this judge. If this is an elected judge, the media is going to go in your state. They're going to attack the judge. There's not a single news outlet that is going to support anything and say, yeah, we need fair elections. No, they're not going to do that. So something else I want you to know, Ron, is that we began, because of what our observers and election workers saw, because of the amazing reports that they sent to us, We published all of it. We created a whole new site, a page on our website. It's www.whoscounting.us/Maricopa. We published all of it. The only thing we didn't publish were the sources, the names and contact information of the people filing it, because I know from personal experience what will happen is that the left will start going after these people. And we didn't eliminate a single report. We had about 2 reports saying everything went fine. We published all of it because I wanted to document it. And now what I've realized is the media simply will not cover. They will not cover election problems. They call us election deniers. They're the deniers. They're denying these facts that all of these eyewitnesses, they were there. And so we also published, if you go to this, you will see we called it Chaos in Maricopa County, and you will see the public statements of people showing up at the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, saying to the supervisors, here's what we saw. You'll see all of the written reports, and they are phenomenal. And it really underscored for me the importance of having those citizen observers and citizen workers, because those leaders got on TV in the middle of the day on election day and said, everything's fixed. Everything's fixed. Well, guess what? The people who are working the polls, they documented it wasn't fixed and that those were lies. We published the memo that was submitted by the volunteer attorneys from all over the county, and everything they were seeing and everything that they reported, which also shows that the leaders were lying. And so look, I mean, we're almost like people in the former Soviet Union. You've got the commissars and the Politburos and Pravda all saying one thing, but we're saying, no, that's not really what's happening. No, the crops weren't a wonderful harvest. The crops failed. We're starving. And you know that, but that's the value and the importance of the citizen engagement. And it's full bore right there in Maricopa County. They can lie and they can try to say nothing happened. We've got the proof, hundreds and hundreds of reports.
So we can, like you said, we can hope the judge does something here, leaves us the opportunity, us meaning Republicans, the opportunity to prove the case. What kind of relief is possible?
Well, I think that they need to order a new election. That's the remedy. That's the remedy under most state laws. If you can establish that there were more irregular votes included in the final tally than, or that there was substantial denial of the ability to vote and all of that kind of thing, normally the remedy is a new election. And I don't know that you can possibly expect to have any confidence that this election that the outcome of this election is trustworthy.
You know what I'm seeing this time as opposed to 2020 is I'm not seeing liberals or even these corrupt Republicans defend themselves. They're simply letting the media do the job of not reporting on the problems.
Right.
There's no way to defend what went on.
No.
But it's enough if, like you said, if Pravda says, you know, we're selling bushels of wheat to our brotherly comrades overseas, while we starve our own people, you know, then that's what they'll report. If the judge doesn't do what we're hoping, and if the media won't do, and that even that includes conservative media.
Yes.
There's been you know, not, you know, I don't really watch TV.
Yeah, I don't either anymore.
But I see the excerpts that people put up. Of course, and I understand from the point of view of Fox, if they just become the voice of of what the culture, the elite culture, has discredited as a phony narrative. That becomes a bit of a credibility death spiral for them also. But what's what? How can we think outside of the box? You've already done that by getting people on the ground. I mean, is there any extent to which having people in the voting centers and on the ground has resulted in even small increases in compliance or improvement because there's someone really right there pushing and saying, no, you can't do that? Not a lawyer, but regular.
Yeah, that happened all over the country. In fact, what's interesting is in 2021, as I said, we kind of started in Virginia. At first, during 2021, a lot of the election directors in the counties were very resistant to having citizens coming in and asking questions, et cetera. What began to evolve, and what we saw in 22 in Virginia, and in some places between the primary and the general in 2022, is that the election officials began to realize that the citizen volunteers knew more about what was needed and what the procedure is supposed to be than they did, and finally started realizing that these are a resource. These people are a resource, and they're there to help. They're not there to obstruct. They're there to help and to make sure that the election is carried out in accordance with the law. And we saw a lot of that across the country, where, as before, it was this is some foreign intervention, foreign substance in my petri dish, that they began to realize, oh, when somebody, and we kept telling people, be polite, be persistent, but be polite, and never lose your temper, never raise your voice. Now, notwithstanding our saying that was a huge part of our training, the media attacked us relentlessly and said that we were going to cause chaos at the polls. The only chaos at the polls in November was by election officials not doing their jobs right. But so we really saw a lot of instances where our election observers and having trained workers who had more training and better training than the county gave them, that they said, no, that's not the way you do that. No, you have to have chain of custody of the ballots. No, you can't do that. And here's what the law says about that. So that was a good thing. And I think that we'll continue to see that. But we have a lot more work to do to try to look. I mean, the left has been undermining and infiltrating our elections for more than a decade, and we haven't been there. And now it's not going to be over. We're not going to push them back in one cycle.
But it seems to me the most intractable problem here is that Arizona has election officials with R's after their name. They have an attorney general with an R after his name who did practically
nothing.
You can say it. Nothing. What's going wrong? Why are these people corrupt? Are these people? I mean, I'm always very skeptical as a lawyer when people talk about people being compromised, people they've got dirt on him. That's amateur hour stuff. There isn't, oh yeah, Roberts went to Epstein Island. Come on, please. And what I'm always explaining to people is these are who these people are. This is not them betraying themselves. This is who they are. But why are people who are these people getting into such positions? I'm not talking about Justice Roberts, of course, positions of power in Republican politics in Arizona. Do you have any idea?
Well, look, there's a history in Arizona of the McCain Republicans who want to be adored by the media, and you don't get adored by the media if you are a practicing principled conservative.
I guess is that a reaction to Goldwater? A sort of.
Arizona. Understand that Arizona used to have, and honestly, I really I've grown up believing this, that there was a time when newspapers made a difference in the political environment in a state. And for a very long time, the Arizona Republic was owned by Dan Quayle's family. It was a very conservative paper, and newspapers had a big influence on politics and the political environment in a state. That's not so true anymore, but for a long time it did. That was true. And you could give rise to a Barry Goldwater, who was a principal conservative. And Arizona has a history of electing very strong conservatives. Well, the Arizona Republic, I mean, John McCain was a conservative when he was first elected, but he came to Washington and became the darling of the media, the left-wing media, because of his support for campaign finance. He came to disdain the Republican Party. And McCain-Feingold basically dismembered the Republican Party. It didn't have any impact on the Democrats, but it really had a big impact on the Republican Party because of the difference in culture and all, which is why the left was pushing it. So that's 20 years ago that was enacted. But McCain became the darling of the media. The Arizona Republic was sold to Gannett. So it's a very left-wing paper now. You have people who've moved into Arizona from California, escaped from California to a low-tax state, Arizona. But you still had Republicans winning the position. So if you wanted to be elected in Arizona, you had to be a Republican, or you did. And so they've started becoming more like John McCain to please the media, because the media would then write nice things about them, and they'd say, I'm a McCain Republican. And so the conflict between the conservative wing of the Republican Party and the more moderate wing, which is the McCain wing, that's a tension in the Republican Party in Arizona. And so we'll see what happens going forward. But Doug Ducey was not a conservative governor. Mark Brnovich was not a conservative attorney general. And so they did reelect a majority of Republicans in the state legislature, barely. They have a bare majority, but there are more conservatives in the legislature. So I've encouraged them to, that they need to take some steps. They need to get rid of these voting centers, go back to precinct voting, and they need to really do some fundamental overhaul. But that's one of the things I was going to tell you too, is that now we're starting these national working groups on particular aspects of the elections, and one is legislative. And we had a call earlier today, and I want to say we had 75 people from across the country who want to work on legislation in their states, bring what they learned from their experiences to legislators, and tell the story of what things need to be changed. And I will tell you, we did these surveys in all the states where we have coalitions and where we were recruiting and deploying poll observers and workers. And for most of them, we asked them, have you done this before? 98% said this was their first time. And then we said, will you do it again? 100%. Yes. Yes. And will you talk to legislators? Yes. So that to me is a real encouragement to see.
These are real grassroots changes that just have to happen.
Yes. Yes. It's not scurrying around at the last minute. It is step by step, the things we need to do to protect and reclaim our elections. And despite all of the attacks and all the names that we've been called, just like, I always just come back to, just like Merrick Garland, the politicized Democrat Attorney General of the United States, calling parents going to school boards domestic terrorists. He's the same guy. They set up a hotline at the FBI for people to be able to call in and make complaints about people supposedly attacking or threatening or harassing election administrators. Well, guess what? 99% of the complaints that were called into that hotline by election administrators, when they were looked at by the FBI, it was just that these election administrators didn't like it because citizens were asking them questions, because they were getting FOIA requests, because people were showing up at their election board meetings. and they didn't like that. So it's, but notwithstanding all of that, our citizens want to be involved. They understand what has to be done to reclaim the elections. And we saw a lot, man, we saw a lot of stuff that we know we need to fix.
Cleta, again, thanks so much. It's really important for people to know just how much is actually going on, and give people hope that electoral democracy is not a dead letter in this country.
No.
People have become so cynical and so despondent over it. And hearing from you what's going on, even though we know what sort of institutional barriers and cultural barriers we're up against, I think nonetheless is going to get people home.
Well, send people to the website. We need every single person, www.whoscounting.us. Listen to our podcast. I'm going to post this podcast as soon as it's out. We'll post it on we'll send it out. And we just need people to get involved. We have a way for everybody and anybody to be involved, and there's a role for everybody.
Glad to have you on and to hopefully help with that. There's no principled argument against what you're doing.
No, just the left attacks, but that's okay. We must be over the target, right? Or they wouldn't be shooting at us.
That's what they say. All right, thanks. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Bye-bye.